Yes. Okay, so we are talking about the digestive system, and in last lecture we stopped here. We are talking about the salivary glands. There are three sets of salivary glands, and those are parotid glands, sublingual glands, and submandibular glands. And the location of those three glands, if you see where those glands are located, parotid glands are located in front of your ear lobule. So just in front of your ear lobule, that's the parotid gland. And parotid gland is the largest among those three types of salivary glands. And then sublingual is below the tongue. That's why it is called sublingual. Lingual is tongue, sub is below, and submandibular is below the mandible, that bone. Now, composition of saliva. Salivary glands secrete or release the saliva, and if you do the chemical analysis of saliva, you'll see that 97 to 99.5% volume of saliva is water. So it is highly watery secretion. Okay? And slightly acidic. That means the pH is slightly lower than 7.0. You will find electrolytes dissolved in water. But electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chloride, phosphate, and bicarbonate. Those electrolytes are present in saliva. Remember, electrolytes should carry the electrical charges, right? Positive or negative. That's why those are electrolytes. And two enzymes are present in saliva. One is called salivary lipase, and another is the amylase. And salivary lipase is also called lingual lipase. Lipase will digest the lipids, and amylase will digest the carbohydrates. Okay.
Can you tell the structure?
Yeah. So lipase will digest what? Lipids, and amylase will digest starch or carbohydrate. Same thing. And there is no proteolytic enzyme in saliva. Remember that is important. No proteolytic enzyme is present in saliva. So no chemical digestion of protein occurs in the mouth. Okay?
No, what type of
Proteolytic. Proteolytic. Okay. Now saliva has mucin. Mucin is what? Mucin is sticky secretion. Okay? And that will help in the formation of food bolus. You know that after you crush the food, then a nice bowl of food will be formed, right? That you have to push back. So nice ball of food will be formed because of sticky secretion. That is mucin. Saliva also has metabolic waste, harmful chemicals that are produced in our body during metabolism. Urea, uric acid, those are excreted from the body through saliva. Most of the urea, uric acid goes out through what? Urine, right? Urine, urea, uric acid goes out through urine, right? But a small amount goes out through saliva. Saliva has lysozyme, immunoglobulin A, defensin, and cyanide compounds, and those things can inactivate or kill the microorganisms. Okay, so those are helpful in defensive mechanisms. So that's the composition of saliva. Now, important thing here, let me tell you a couple of important things here. First, you need to know all of them, but if you ask me which are the important, I will ask, saliva is what type of secretion? Mostly Watery. What percentage of saliva is water? 97 to 99.5. Okay? And is it slightly acidic or alkaline? Slightly acidic. Number 3. Which digestive enzyme is absent in saliva? Proteolysis. Which are present? Lipase and amylase. Lipase will digest the lipids and amylase will digest the starch or carbohydrates. Okay? Those are important things. Now we talk about teeth. We see two types of teeth. One is present in small kids. Those are called deciduous teeth. There are between 6 to 24 months of age in small kids and 20 in number. So this deciduous teeth are 20 in number, and then after those teeth come off, then new teeth are formed, and those are 32 in number, and those are called permanent teeth. In adult mouth, you will see permanent teeth, 32 in number. Now, if you see the number of different types of teeth in adults, incisors are total 8. How many dental arches we have? 2, upper arch and lower arch, right? And in each arch we have how many incisors? 4. So total we have 8 incisors. And we have 4 canines. So each arch we have 2 canine teeth. The total upper arch we have 2, lower arch we have 2. And then behind the canine we have premolars, total 8. That means in each arch we have 4. And then behind the premolar we have molars, 12. So each arch we have 6. Now if I ask you, each arch, how many incisors you have? 4, right? Now if you divide the arch into right and left half, in each half you have how many? 2. Very good. 2 to 4, 2 to 4, okay? Total 8 incisors. Okay. So that's the permanent teeth. So here in this picture you see the deciduous teeth, also called milk teeth, and total 10 in one arch. And here the permanent teeth, so should be 16. And you see these are the incisors, and then canine, and then premolar, and then molar. So 2 in each half of each arch we have 2 incisors, 1 canine, 2 premolar, and 3 molars. Okay. So that's the permanent teeth. I may ask you how many deciduous teeth the kids have, and how many are permanent teeth, and among permanent teeth, which type is how many. Now, if you see the parts of a tooth has crown, neck, and root, those 3 parts. Okay. So the crown part you can see, that's the exposed part of a tooth, and then the neck part is between, very short part between the crown and the root, and the root part is inside the bony socket of your maxilla and mandible. Okay, so the root part is embedded inside the jaw bones, the maxilla and mandibles. Those are 3 parts. Now, if you see the structure of a tooth, if you cut it and see the structure, the cementum is the calcified connective tissue that covers the root and attaches is to the periodontal ligament. Then periodontal ligament, you will see that ligament is very specialized ligament that connects the to the bony socket. Okay, we'll see in picture. You'll see dentin, bone-like materials under enamel, and then pulp cavity. That cavity contains the blood vessels and nerves, and pulp is the soft connective tissue inside the pulp cavity, and then root canal that extends from the pulp cavity to the apical foramen of the
What
root.
did you say about dentin?
Dentin is bone-like structure under the enamel. You see here this picture, and it will be clear. So if you cut the tooth and see, first let's see three parts of the tooth. The exposed part that you can see from outside, that is the crown. Okay, this part you can see from outside, and then under the gum, this is the gum. Under the gum, that small part, that is the neck, and then the part inside the bone, your jawbone, that is the root. Okay, so this whole part is the root. Under the gum, this part is the neck, and this is the crown. Now, if you see the structure, outermost layer is the enamel, that we can see the white outer part, and then under the enamel you have dentin. That part is also white part, bone-like structure, and then you have pulp cavity, and this cavity is called the pulp cavity, and pulp cavity has soft connective tissue in which the artery, the vein, and nerves are present. Okay? So pulp cavity contains the soft connective tissue, and in which the blood vessels and nerves are present. Okay? And another structure, cementum, that attaches the dentin to the ligament, periodontal ligament here. So cementum is only present in this part, not the crown part, okay, this root part. Now, periodontal ligament is this one, and that ligament attaches the tooth to the bony socket. So, in this broken structure. Yes, tooth to the bone. The ligament, you know, that connects the bone to bone, right? And so tooth is connected to the bone by periodontal ligament. It is a highly specialized type ligament that is only present in the tooth. Okay, so those are the structures, three parts and structures. Okay.
So it's like bone, but it has nerve in it. The teeth. It's the only part of the body that's bone that it shows out of the surface of the body.
Yes. And they directly they don't have the nerves. The nerves are present in the and blood vessels in the palm. They're not inside the body part. Okay. Regulation of gastrointestinal tract. Okay. Now, how the gastrointestinal regulation takes place? Regulation of what? When we say regulation of gastrointestinal tract, regulation of two things. One is regulation of contraction or movement, contraction, and regulation of secretion. So those are the regulations occur in gastrointestinal tract. You know that gastrointestinal tract contracts like this, right? And secretion occurs. Those two things should be controlled or regulated, okay? Now, in the wall of the gastrointestinal tract, you have two types of receptors, mechanoreceptors and chemoreceptors. You can tell what type of receptors are there by their name. First, let's see chemoreceptors. Chemoreceptors will be activated by what? Chemicals. Now, what are the chemicals? Go inside your gastrointestinal tract. The chemicals are foods. Foods are chemicals. All foods are chemicals, okay? Proteins, carbohydrates, fats, all are chemicals. So, the receptors will be activated by the food molecules. Those are chemoreceptors or by chemicals. And mechanoreceptors will be activated by pressure. Pressure is the mechanical force. So when you eat food, you know two things happen. When you eat food, that food enters into your gastrointestinal tract, right? So food is a chemical, so nutrients will activate the chemoreceptors. At the same time, when you eat the food will create pressure on the wall of the gastrointestinal tract, right? So that's what type of receptors will be activated by that? Mechanoreceptors, okay? So those are two types of receptors. And two types of controls are present, intrinsic control and extrinsic control. So what are the intrinsic and extrinsic controls? The enteric nerve plexuses initiate short reflexes in response to stimuli in the gastrointestinal tract, and long reflexes in response to stimuli inside or outside of gastrointestinal tract that involve central nervous system and autonomic nerves. I'll talk about this soon. So just let's see what happens here. So intrinsic, the term intrinsic means inside, right? And extrinsic means outside. So in case of intrinsic, what will happen? When you eat the food, this is the wall of your gastrointestinal tract. So this is a cross section. You see the lumen where the food should be located. Okay. Okay. When you eat the food, the nutrients are chemicals, right? Food is chemical. So chemoreceptors will be activated by the food molecules, and also the food will cause pressure on the wall. So mechanoreceptors will be activated. Okay? So just remember those two receptors will be activated by the presence of food in your gastrointestinal tract. And those receptors will send signal to the local nerve plexus. What is local nerve plexus? Those nerves are located inside the wall of the gastrointestinal tract, right? Those are local. So the signal will go to local nerve plexus, and then that nerve plexus will send signal to the smooth muscle and glands. And smooth muscle will do what? Contraction. And glands will do what? Secretion. So you see here the activation of chemoreceptors and mechanoreceptors by the food, right? Food will activate those receptors. And then receptors will send signal to the muscles and glands via the local nerve plexus. That means that nerve is lying in the wall of the gastrointestinal tract, not going outside, okay, locally, and will cause the contraction and secretion. Okay? So everything is happening inside the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. Make sense? That's the short reflex or intrinsic or local control. And now, what is long reflex or extrinsic control? Signal can also, after those chemoreceptors and mechanoreceptors get activated in the wall, the signal can also get out from the wall of the gastrointestinal tract and go to the spinal cord or brain. So signal can also get out from the gastrointestinal tract and go to the spinal cord or to your brain. That means central nervous system, right? And then central nervous system can send signal back to the intrinsic nerve plexus, and intrinsic nerve plexus will activate the muscle and glands will cause the contraction and secretion. So the difference is extrinsic and intrinsic. Intrinsic, everything will occur where? Inside the wall of the GI tract. And in case of extrinsic, the signal will go to your brain or spinal cord, that's central nervous system, and then central nervous system will send signal back to the wall and will activate the muscle and the glands. Okay? So that's the difference. So which one is short, which one is long? The intrinsic is short and extrinsic is long because it's going to the brain and coming back long way, it's traveling. Okay?
Is it going to send the central nervous system is going to send the signal back to the local?
Local, because they have to work through local. Local is the nerves in your wall of gastrointestinal tract. So there is no other way that without activating the local you can contract the muscle of the wall. Okay, so they must send signal back to the local. Now there is another type of extrinsic that is very interesting. You know that if you are very hungry, if I show you very delicious food, okay, by smelling or just seeing the food, what will happen in your mouth? Saliva secretion will occur. What will happen in your stomach? Secretion will occur, and also movement you will feel a little bit. Okay, so that is coming from outside of your body, the signal. No food is in your mouth or intestine yet, right? But that can also stimulate the contraction and secretion. That's also extrinsic because coming from outside. Okay, that is called cephalic, but it's part of extrinsic. It has a different name, cephalic phase of secretion and contraction. So extrinsic could be two types. One is getting out from the wall and going to the central nervous system, coming back. Another is not originating in your gastrointestinal tract, originating from outside of the body. You are seeing or smelling the food. Okay, so that's the extrinsic as well. It has a different name that is called cephalic. Okay, so those are the controls of secretion and movement. So in the test, I may ask you that what are the receptors? Chemoreceptors and mechanoreceptors, and both will be activated by what? Food. Okay, and then what are the controls? Extrinsic and intrinsic. Intrinsic, everything will occur inside the wall, and in case of extrinsic, the signal will go to the central nervous system or can come from outside of the body, right? When you see, if you see or smell that secretion or contraction, that is called what? Cephalic phase. Okay, and now we'll see the structure of the wall of gastrointestinal tract. You know that gastrointestinal tract is a tube-like structure from the mouth to the anus. So if you make a cross section of that tube, the wall of that tube, if you make a cross section of the tube, in the wall of that tube, you will see 4 basic layers are present everywhere. Okay? So what are those 4 basic layers? Those 4 basic layers from inside to outside are mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa. So those are 4 basic layers of the gastrointestinal tract. So we'll see how they look like. So innermost is the mucosa. Okay. So this is the mucosa layer, and then submucosa here, this one, and then muscularis layer, and then outermost is the serosa. Okay, so those are the 4 layers. Now, mucosa, the innermost layer, lies the lumen. Lumen means the opening inside the tube. Okay, so the innermost lining is formed by the mucosa, and the mucosa has three sub-layers. So innermost layer, mucosa, has three sub-layers. What are those? Epithelium, lamina propria, and muscularis mucosa. And the functions of mucosa: secretes mucus. Mucus is that slippery secretion. Digestive enzymes and hormones are secreted by the mucosa. Absorbs end products of digestion. After digestion, the nutrient molecules should be taken into the blood. Okay, so that absorption is helped by mucosa. Protects against infectious diseases. So microorganisms cannot enter into the blood because of the mucosa. That prevents the microorganisms from entering into the blood. Okay. Now if you see the picture, those three sublayers of mucosa are here. So this is the epithelial lining, epithelium, and then under the epithelium, this is connective tissue layer that is called the lamina propria, and then the third one is the muscularis. Muscularis is formed by smooth muscle, of course. So this is the muscularis, okay? The epithelium, lamina propria, and muscularis.
So the epithelium is the innermost of those
Innermost
three layers?
and formed by epithelial cells. Okay?
So why is it that isn't there friendly bacteria? Something that's called friendly bacteria, they say is in yogurt.
Well, that's
So why
E.
don't-
coli,
why
right?
doesn't
E.
that-
coli, good E. coli should be present in our intestine.
So that they don't get killed by.
No, they will reside inside your gastrointestinal tract, and they help in digestion. Okay, so that's mucosa, and okay, so the epithelium of mucosa is formed by simple columnar epithelia, simple columnar type of cells, and the simple columnar epithelia helps in the absorption of nutrients. So the epithelium has simple columnar epithelial cells that help in the absorption, and another type of cells are present in the epithelium. Those are mucus secreting cells. They will secrete mucus. Mucus is very important because mucus, I said you that mucus is slippery secretion, right? So that will keep the wall, inner surface of your gastrointestinal tract very slippery, so the food can easily pass. Okay, food can easily pass through the gastrointestinal tract. Okay, and mucus has another important function is protects digestive organs from enzymes. You know that acids are secreted in your stomach, right? And that acid, if the mucus doesn't line the inner surface of your gastrointestinal tract, the acid will get easily attached to the wall of the gastrointestinal tract and will destroy the wall of the gastrointestinal tract because acid is harmful, right? So mucus forms a fine layer or coat inside the gastrointestinal tract and does two things. Since it is slippery, it helps in the passage of food. Number two, it protects the wall from the acidic secretion. Just remember those two. Lamina propria layer of mucosa is formed by connective tissue, and it has blood vessels and another very important thing, that's the lymphoid follicles. Lymphoid follicles are present in the lamina propria, and lymphoid follicles contain the lymphocytes, you know that, and lymphocytes kill the microorganisms. Okay, muscularis mucosa, that is formed by smooth muscle. and produces weak movement of the wall. So muscularis mucosa of mucosa is formed by smooth muscle and produces weak movement because we have another muscular layer. You remember those 4 basic layers? One is the muscularis externa. That is the main muscle layer. So that will cause the forceful contraction.
You said that the epithelial help in absorption of nutrients?
Yes. Submucosa is formed by connective tissue and it contains the blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, lymphoid follicles and nerve plexus. So all those important structures are located in the submucosa. Lymphatic vessels, lymphoid follicles, blood vessels and nerves. Muscularis externa, now that thick muscular layer which will cause more powerful contraction. So muscularis externa, in this layer, the smooth muscle fibers are arranged in 2 ways. See here, some smooth muscle fibers are going like this. If this is the tube, the smooth muscle fibers are going like this, and some smooth muscle fibers are going like this. Okay, so 2 arrangement. One type of smooth muscle fibers are going like this, circle, and another is longitudinal like this. Okay, so circular is the inner muscle fibers and outer muscle fibers are going along the tube, longitudinal. But both are, remember, smooth muscle fibers, just arrangement is different. Okay, the way they are arranged. Responsible for the movement of the wall. Now if I ask you a simple question, that circular muscle fibers will cause what? If the circular muscle fibers contract, it will cause the constriction of the lumen. The lumen will get narrow, right? Circular muscle fibers. This is the lumen, right? So if it contracts, it will narrow the lumen. And longitudinal muscle fibers will do what? If they contract, they will make the tube shorter because longitudinal muscle fibers are going like this, right? So when they will contract, they will make the tube what? Shorter, like this. Make sense?
Yeah.
No. Okay. So circular muscle fibers are like this. Okay. This is the tube, lumen, and circular muscle. This is circular muscle. Okay. If circular muscle contracts, then the lumen will get smaller. Very good. And longitudinal is going like this. Okay. So if all those fibers contract, then the tube will get shorter. Okay. So those are the actions of those 2, and both are important. Okay. Serosa is the outermost layer, and serosa is nothing but visceral peritoneum. You have seen when I showed you the peritoneum, this is the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. So this peritoneum is the parietal one, and from parietal, the peritoneum goes in and covers the gastrointestinal tract like this. This is the visceral, right? Visceral peritoneum. So it is nothing but the serosa is nothing but the visceral peritoneum. That's the outermost layer.
Wait, were you looking at?
You remember when we talked about peritoneum? It has how many layers?
2.
2. The one is attached to the wall of the abdomen, that's the parietal. And parietal is going inside and covering your stomach, your intestine like this, right? So that one is the visceral. Now if you cut the small intestine like this or stomach like this, the outermost layer should be that peritoneum, visceral peritoneum. So that's the serosa. So serosa is nothing but the visceral peritoneum. Okay? Okay. Okay. Now you remember that when we talked about the control of secretion and contraction, intrinsic, extrinsic, right? We have seen that in the wall of gastrointestinal tract we have intrinsic nerve plexus. You remember that? That will cause the secretion and contraction. So intrinsic nerve plexus, there are two types of plexus. One is submucosal nerve plexus located in the submucosa, that layer, and another is myenteric nerve plexus. Myenteric, myo means muscle, so myenteric nerve plexus are the nerve plexus cells located inside the muscle. That means in the muscularis layer. Muscularis external layer, that's the myenteric nerve plexus, and submucosal nerve plexus. Those are intrinsic nerve plexus, will cause the contraction and secretion. And also, in the wall of gastrointestinal tract, we have autonomic nerve nervous system fibers, sympathetic and parasympathetic. You know that autonomic has two divisions, sympathetic division and parasympathetic division, and both are present. Okay, so just know that those are the nerve autonomic nervous system. And autonomic nervous system has how many divisions? Two. You all know that, sympathetic and parasympathetic. And they control the secretion as well as the contraction. Now,
Wait, so the autonomic, the sympathetic, and the parasympathetic?
we have talked about that in AP1. Okay, now the movement of the gastrointestinal tract. Yes.
Wait, what are the nerve plexuses? What is that again?
Which one?
I'm so confused. You went through that.
Intrinsic. Okay, so intrinsic nerve plexuses are the nerve plexuses we have taught when we talked about the control of secretion and contraction. You remember? Intrinsic, extrinsic.
Inside the wall.
Inside the wall, right? Intrinsic nerve plexuses. Where they are located? One set is present in the submucosa. That's the
Do we need to know what
submucosa.
it does?
Yes, that's the submucosa, right? Another set is present in the muscular layer.
The muscular.
That's the myenteric. Myo means muscle. Okay? Got it? And also we have autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nerves. And autonomic nerves, you know, that have two divisions, sympathetic and parasympathetic.
Do we need to know anything about this?
No, just know the name. Okay? Now we'll talk about different types of movements occur in the gastrointestinal tract. So, in the gastrointestinal tract, although many books say that two types of movement, but actually another type of movement is present, so I'll write it here. One is peristalsis, and another is the segmental, and third type of movement that's interesting called pendular movement. So those are three types of movements occur in the gastrointestinal tract. Okay. Now, peristalsis. What is peristalsis? Peristalsis is the best way to explain is if you take a rubber tube. Okay, take a rubber tube and put some slippery thing inside the tube and put your the rig, okay, or just put a round marble inside it or ring inside it, and then hold outside like this with your fingers and squeeze and push it forward. Okay, so the type of
Like you do the toothpaste kind of.
yes. So you squeeze like this, right? So okay, so you put something round and push like this. That's the peristalsis of, and that round thing is the food bolus. Okay, so food bolus will go downwards like this. So that type of movement is the peristalsis. So basically, the muscle will push the food bolus from the back and will let it go like this. Since inside is slippery, it will move. Okay. And segmentation. So peristalsis is wavy movement, right? When wave starts, if you throw something in water, the wave will start and will go to the side, right? Yeah. So that is peristalsis. In case of segmentation, the movement will not move like wave. It's like in many locations, if this is the gastrointestinal tract, in many locations at the same time, the contraction and realization will occur, but it will not move down.
What?
Same case. This is the tube, the contraction and realization is local.
It happens
Locally.
all along or just where the food is?
All along.
I
Okay.
mean, it just keeps
But the food-
closing, so it makes the food move.
Yes, food will stimulate the movement, of course. Food will stimulate the mechanical receptors, mechanoreceptors. So now, if you see the contraction has started here, the contraction has, your food is here, okay? Just think that your food is here. So contraction will occur there, right? Start there, and the contraction will move like this to move the food down. Make sense? So that's what? Peristalsis. Now, food is all along here, and contraction, realization occurring at different locations like this. That's the segmentation.
But
Okay?
why does that segmentation? What is
Just to break the long food bolus into small pieces. Cut it into
So
small pieces.
it doesn't squeeze it from the top of where the food is, it
No,
squeezes it
no.
from the
Along
whole
the side of the
area,
food. Yeah.
all around where the food
Yes.
is.
Okay, so it will split or divide the food, long food bolus into small pieces. Okay, so that's the segmentation. Segments, you know, segments means pieces, breaking into pieces. Okay, pendular. Small amount of movement, pendular movement occurs in your gastrointestinal tract. You know that when we talk about mesentery, this is the mesentery. Okay, so that's the peritoneum hanging the gastrointestinal tract inside your abdominal cavity, right? This? So one end is attached to the wall and other end is attached to the gastrointestinal tract. So a small amount of pendular movement occurs in the gastrointestinal tract too. So those are three types of movements. So in last pendulum, you know pendulum?
Like back and forth.
And you said that's your mesentery?
Yeah, mesentery. Mesentery is hanging the gastrointestinal tract, so it will move like this. The mesentery is attached to the wall, right? One end, and other end is attached to the small intestine, for example. So it will move like
So mesentery is the area where this movement will occur, or is it is the mesentery is the one that,
this is the mesentery, right?
right?
This is peritoneum. Okay, so this end is attached to the wall. Like if I tie you with a rope and hang to the wall, then what type of movement is possible? Like this, right? Pendular, right? So this is actually cavity, right? Inside the cavity, your intestine is attached to the wall by the mesentery. Okay? So it will move like this. We don't know why that happens, but that movement also. Okay, in last class we have talked about the first organ of your gastrointestinal tract, that's the mouth, right? We have talked about mouth. So now we'll talk about the esophagus, the next to the mouth. Next to the mouth is the pharynx and then esophagus. We have talked about pharynx too, three parts. So esophagus is a flat muscular tube from laryngopharynx to stomach. So it starts from the pharynx, lower end of pharynx, and ends at the stomach. And it pierces diaphragm at esophageal hiatus. So if this is the diaphragm and this is your stomach, this is esophagus and this is your stomach. So this is diaphragm. The esophagus pass through the diaphragm, okay, and this opening is called the hiatus, through which the esophagus pierces the diaphragm. That's the esophageal hiatus, and joins stomach at the cardiac orifice. So this area is called cardiac orifice. Orifice is opening, so cardiac indicates the stomach. Okay, so cardiac orifice. Now, inner lining of esophagus. Inner lining of esophagus is stratified squamous. That makes sense, right? Because stratified squamous you will find where the friction occurs, right? And it is a narrow tube, so food passes through it. That's why it is lined with stratified squamous. And in the stomach, the lining is simple columnar because you know that in the stomach we need absorption and secretion. So simple columnar. Esophageal glands are present in the submucosa and that secrete mucus and that helps in the movement of the food bolus. When you swallow the food enters into esophagus, and esophagus is a long tube, right? And the inner surface of esophagus has mucus that keeps the surface slippery, right? So food can very fast goes from the pharynx to the stomach, very fast. It doesn't take long time because of that mucus. And the wall, muscularis layer of esophagus is intestine. Only in esophagus, the upper part of the esophagus, the wall is formed by skeletal muscle, and lower part of esophagus, the wall is formed by smooth muscle. And then all other parts of gastrointestinal tract, your stomach, your small intestine, large intestine, is smooth muscle. Only the esophagus, the upper part is skeletal, lower part is smooth. So remember that.
I'm sorry, what did you say about the cardiac orifice?
Orifice is the opening, okay? Opening, orifice. So where the esophagus enters into the stomach, that opening is called the cardiac orifice. Okay.
Why is it the cardiac refers to your stomach?
Cardiac also indicates the stomach, or cardiac also indicates the heart, but cardiac also indicates the stomach. Okay? Gastro indicates the stomach, also cardiac indicates the stomach. Okay, so esophagus, if you make a cross section of esophagus, you see those four basic layers. We have talked about that. All gastrointestinal tract, everywhere you will find those four basic layers. So innermost is the mucosa and then submucosa. So this is mucosa and then submucosa and then muscularis externa. This is the muscular layer, and then the outermost layer is what? When we talk about four basic layers, I said that outermost layer is the serosa, right? And which is what? Nothing but visceral peritoneum. Right? Visceral peritoneum. Is there any peritoneum in your neck?
No.
Peritoneum only present in your abdominal cavity, abdomen, right? So esophagus is here. So there is no visceral peritoneum. That's why this is not called serosa, this is called adventitia, because it's not really the same structure as visceral peritoneum. Okay? So the outermost layer in case of esophagus is adventitia, remember that. I may ask this in the now we talk about deglutition. Deglutition is also by swallowing of the food. So deglutition involves the tongue, soft palate, pharynx, esophagus, and 22 muscle groups. So those all together work to work in deglutition, during deglutition. So deglutition or swallowing of food has two phases, buccal phase and pharyngeal esophageal phase, also called pharyngoesophageal phase. So buccal phase takes place inside the mouth because that's the buccal cavity or oral cavity, same thing, okay? Happens in the mouth. So deglutition or swallowing starts inside the mouth, and then next phase is pharyngoesophageal in pharynx and esophagus. So first, what happens in buccal phase? After we eat the food, put the food inside the mouth, we crush the food, and food gets mixed with the saliva, and a nice bolus of food is formed, right? Nice food bolus is formed. And when the bolus is ready, what we do? during the buccal phase, the tongue presses against the hard palate and forcing the food bolus into the oropharynx. You see here, the front part of tongue will move up and the tongue will be pressed against the hard palate. This is the hard palate. So that will push the food bolus from the front to the back. So we'll push the food and food will, since it is slippery, so food will start to move backwards towards what? Oropharynx. It should not go to nasopharynx, right? So the food will enter into the oropharynx. Nasopharynx is this part only for air. Okay. And this phase is voluntary or involuntary? The buccal phase? Voluntary. We move the tongue voluntarily, right? To push the food backwards. Okay. And during that time, the upper esophageal sphincter, there is a sphincter here. This is the esophagus. Upper esophageal sphincter will remain closed, constricted. Okay. Okay. Now see what happens. When the food will enter into the oropharynx, that's the starting of pharyngeal esophageal phase, because food is now already in the oropharynx. So pharyngoesophageal phase has started. When the food will enter into the oropharynx, during that time, the uvula and soft palate will move up to do what? To prevent the food from entering into nasopharynx. Make sense? So uvula and soft palate will move up and will block that passage. So food will not be able to move up, will go down. If the food moves up, that's dangerous, will enter into nasopharynx. Okay? And the upper esophageal sphincter will get open, will relax, so the food will be able to enter from the pharynx to the esophagus. Okay, the sphincter was closed before during the buccal phase, but now it got opened, so it allows the food to enter into the esophagus. Okay. When the food bolus will enter into the esophagus, the upper esophageal sphincter will get closed again. That is important, because if it stays large open, then food will able to go back into the pharynx, right? We don't want. We want the food to go only down, and that's will make sure that food is not going back into the pharynx. So food has no way, no choice. It has to move down. And the wall of the esophagus is very slippery, right? The inner surface. So once the food is inside the esophagus, it will very fast go down. Okay, now you see what type of movement will move the food down? Peristalsis. Peristalsis will move the food down. Yes.
So when you throw up, does that open up again?
Which one?
The sphincters.
Upper esophageal sphincter will remain closed when the food is in your mouth, okay? Then, when you push the food back into your pharynx, okay? Then the upper esophageal sphincter will open, because from the pharynx the food will go to the esophagus. If it is not open, then food will not go to the esophagus, right?
So after the
But when you throw up,
it's what's open.
Face?
if you throw up, then it opens for the food to
If you
come up.
vomit.
Okay.
You vomit?
Yeah, so it's not completely closed, okay? And if for some reason it gets open, then food can, if the gas pushes the food from the bottom, the food will come out. That happens. If something pushes, most of the cases the gas tries to come out suddenly, and that will push, and the sphincter will get open, because it is not really a very strong sphincter. It's a sphincter, but it can get open by pressure. That happens. And in small kids, you know that the sphincters are not very strong. That's why they pee in the bed, and the sphincters are not controlled well by the bottom part of the bed. So That's why in small kids you see.
Is that sphincter what, people have a problem with if they have acid reflux?
That's the lower sphincter. We'll talk about that, yes. Okay, so once the food is in the food bolus in the esophagus, it will very quickly move down by peristalsis. That's wavy movement. And the food will enter into the stomach through the gastroesophageal sphincter opening. So the gastroesophageal sphincter will get open. But see here, when the food is passing through the esophagus, the gastroesophageal sphincter, that's the lower end of the esophagus, that sphincter. So we have seen two sphincter, the upper esophageal sphincter and lower one is the gastroesophageal, that means stomach and esophagus. This sphincter will remain closed, but when the food will approach very close to the stomach, then that lower sphincter will get opened. Okay, so the food will be able to enter into the stomach. And in when you get older, the sphincters, the muscles get weaker, right? So what happens? The gastroesophageal sphincter in many cases can get weak, and the stomach content can move up easily because the sphincter is loose, and that can cause erosion or damage to the lower part of the esophagus because the acid can move up, right? And repeated movement of acid content into your esophagus can cause the lesion in the wall, and that happens very commonly. And if you lie down, if the sphincter is open, then the stomach content can move up easily. So that's why acid reflux, that's the acid reflux. The stomach content will enter into the lower part of the esophagus. Okay, now we'll see the stomach. Next to the esophagus is the stomach. The stomach is a large, hollow, muscular organ, and if you see the stomach, it has 4 different parts. What are the 4 different parts? The cardiac part, fundus, body, and pyloric part. So cardiac part is the part where the esophagus enters into the stomach. So near the entrance of the esophagus, this part is called the cardiac part. Then fundus. Fundus is dome-shaped part of the stomach. You know dome, right? D-O-M-E, dome-shaped part. That part is the fundus. And then, so that is the fundus. That's the cardiac area. And then this part is the body of the stomach. Body of the stomach. And last part is the pyloric part. So 4 parts. If I ask you how many parts the stomach has, how many? 4. The cardiac part, the fundus, the body, and the pyloric part. Okay. Now, if you see the wall of the stomach, you remember when we talked about 4 basic layers of the wall of the gastrointestinal tract. I showed you the mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa, right? Now, I told you that in the muscularis externa, the smooth muscle fibers are arranged in how many ways? 2. The circular and longitudinal. That's true for all other parts of the gastrointestinal tract except the stomach. The stomach has an additional layer that's called the oblique. So some muscle fibers are obliquely based. So that oblique layer is the innermost layer. So an extra layer of smooth muscle is present in the stomach. That's the oblique layer. Remember that. So stomach wall, muscular part has 3 layers. Okay. Now,
Which
inside,
direction does that take me again? Yeah, that's this one.
oblique. This is the longitudinal, right? Straight down. And this is oblique.
And, so they
Something
go,
like that.
some go this way, some go this way, and some go this
Yes.
way.
So innermost fibers go oblique. Okay. Now, if you see inside the stomach, there are many folds present inside the stomach. Those folds are formed by mucosa. That's the innermost layer, right? Of those four basic layers, innermost layer is the mucosa. So many mucosal folds are present in the inner surface of the stomach. Those folds are called rugae. Rugae, gastric rugae should be here. Here, rugae of mucosa. So mucosa will form many folds. You see here, these are the folds. You see these folds? These are called what? Rugae. And since the rugae in the stomach, these are called gastric rugae, and formed by what? Which layer? The mucosa. The mucosa form the rugae. Now, when the stomach is empty, the gastric rugae are more prominent. That makes sense, right? If it is stressed, then the folds will disappear, will be less prominent because you are stressing the wall. Okay, so the folds will be less prominent. When the stomach is empty, you will see those rugae very clearly and prominent. Okay, so that's about the stomach. If I ask you what's the function of the stomach, first function is the storage of food, because food is stored in the stomach for hours, several hours, and also digestion. Stomach secretes hydrochloric acid and other enzymes. They will help in digestion. And very little absorption occurs in the stomach. Absorption mainly occurs in the small intestine, remember. So stomach is responsible for storage of food and digestion, because stomach secretes the enzymes and hydrochloric acid. So digestion and storage. And the small intestine is responsible for digestion as well as absorption. Okay. Now, lesser and greater omentum. If you see the stomach, it has two curvatures. This is the lesser curvature, and this is the greater curve or greater curvature. Okay, this one is greater and this one is lesser, smaller one. Now, what happens? The lesser curvature is this one. Lesser curvature gets attached, provides attachment to the lesser omentum, and greater curvature provides attachment to the greater omentum. So, what are the omentum? Omentum are connective tissue membranes. Okay, and what happens? You remember this picture, not very nice, but you will understand. So, if this is your stomach and this is your liver, this is stomach and this is your liver, inside your abdominal cavity. So, this is the mesentery, right? Mesentery. Then mesentery covers the stomach, and also mesentery covers the liver. Okay. So what happens? You see the visceral peritoneum covers the liver, and then join together here and then move towards the stomach and covers the stomach here, okay? And from there, what happens? They move down like this. So I'm repeating again. See here, this is the liver, this is the stomach. So from the wall of the abdomen, the visceral peritoneum, right, is going in and covering the stomach like this, covering the stomach, and then in this side they are joining together, right? And this is called the lesser omentum. So this is the liver. Liver is being covered. So see here, this is the liver, this is the stomach, okay? So first, the omentum will cover the liver like this and will join in the other side, right? Cover like this and join and form what? Lesser omentum. And then that is heading to the stomach. And again, covering the stomach like this and going down, okay? So now let
So
me
that's
show
just
you.
the name of the,
It's same structure, okay?
Right.
It's peritoneum, but
Peritoneum.
different name.
but it's
Different.
just the specific name.
Specific name.
Okay.
So from the liver to the stomach, that one is lesser omentum, okay? And then it is covering the stomach and joining in this side, greater curvature side. And now I said after the join they move down, right? But they did not show here because they have dissected that part out. But this is the greater omentum and it should move down like this. Drag down like the bed sheet. When you put the bed sheet, the part goes down, right? So it will go down and cover the intestine from the front like this. But
It covers the transverse colon.
transverse colon as well as the small intestine.
It's like a sheet that.
Like a
covers
sheet
it
that
down.
covers the front of the
And all,
intestine.
it's all attached to that layer.
And
It's a layer.
the part that's covering the intestine and covering the stomach is the greater.
Yeah, going down from the stomach and covering the intestine. Yes. That's the greater omentum. Okay? The greater omentum is greater because it covers the intestine, right? Like this. And lesser omentum is small, short, because from the liver to the stomach.
It just links.
Yeah. So that's the lesser omentum. Okay? Now, you know that lot of fat accumulates on the greater omentum. That's why you see the pad of fat in your abdomen. Under the muscle, you have thick pad of fat because greater omentum, on the greater omentum, fat can easily accumulate. So that's the main storage of fat in our body, the greater omentum. Okay? And that greater omentum has a couple of important functions. Since a lot of fat can accumulate there, get attached there easily, it forms a pad of fat and that protects our abdominal organs, right? Protection. Number two, insulation. So the heat can not easily get in or get out from the abdominal cavity. So those are important functions. And stored fat. Fat is stored in the greater omentum. That's the main location where the fat is stored in our body. And we know that stored fat is not bad for all the time. It also helps, right? Provides ATP. So those are the functions. Okay, so we're done. So